Smoke rolled across the metal floors of Outpost Helix as alarms echoed through every hallway. The red emergency lights flashed again and again, cutting through the haze like a heartbeat that was slowly losing strength. Commander Vorlak's claws trembled, though he tried hard to hide it from the frightened officers around him. The Skarn fleet had arrived earlier than anyone expected, and now the outpost was breaking apart under the attack. A loud explosion shook the entire structure. Dust fell from the ceiling. One of the junior engineers cried out as lights flickered and then died in the far corridor. The base's defensive shields were already gone. The outer walls would soon follow. Vorlak knew this. Everyone knew this. Still, he forced his voice to stay calm as he shouted orders. Hold your positions. Reroute power to structural supports. Keep the medical bay online as long as possible. But even as he spoke, he heard the fear in his own tone. The Skarn were not raiders or simple pirates. They were conquerors. They destroyed everything in their path. And for reasons none of the Helix crew understood, the Skarn wanted this small outpost badly enough to send a full strike force. A second officer ran up to Vorlak, panting hard. His skin was pale, and his ears were tight against his head, clear signs of panic. Commander. The Skarn have broken through Sector C. We lost all contact with the defense team there. We think they're gone. Vorlak closed his eyes for a moment. The crew from Sector C had been good, skilled workers. Now they were simply gone. Understood, he said softly. Fall back to the central hall. Move fast. As the officer rushed away, Vorlak stared at the flickering main screen. It showed the shape of the enemy flagship drifting closer through the smoke-filled space outside the broken windows. The ship was huge, dark metal, sharp angles, glowing marks like staring eyes. It made the outpost look like a child's toy. The communication station sparked again. One of the techs shouted, "Commander, long-range channels are failing. If we want to send a distress call, it must be now." Vorlak hesitated. Their own military had not responded to earlier warnings. Perhaps the messages never made it through. Perhaps their command was already destroyed. He did not know. But he knew one thing: if they did nothing, every person on Outpost Helix would die. Send the call, he ordered. The tech hit the final emergency sequence. A simple message went out, short and desperate. To any Allied vessel in range. Outpost Helix requesting backup. Immediate threat. Repeat, requesting backup. Anyone. Please respond. The message repeated twice, and then the transmitter burned out with a sharp crack. The screen dimmed, leaving the room in half darkness again. No one spoke. No one breathed. They just waited, listening to the distant booms of Skarn weapons hammering what little remained of their defenses. Minute after minute passed. Nothing. Vorlak lowered his head. Prepare to destroy sensitive data. If capture is unavoidable, we cannot let the Skarn take our research. A low hum suddenly cut through the silence. The sensor operator blinked at her display. Commander. I'm picking up something. Vorlak looked up sharply. A Skarn dropship? No, sir. It's something else. Small ship. Fast. Entering our airspace. The entire crew turned toward the screen as the operator magnified the signal. A tiny, unfamiliar vessel shot toward the outpost. It moved strangely, zigzagging, rolling, changing speed in ways no sane pilot would attempt. Even under heavy fire, it did not slow down. Identify the species, Vorlak said. The outpost AI struggled to read the data. Its voice crackled slightly. Unknown configuration. Hull is reinforced with unusual materials. Attempting biological scan. Another pause. Then the AI announced the result in a tone that made every alien in the room go still. Origin, human. Classification, Deathworld species. A cold wave moved through the command center. Every species in the galaxy knew stories about humans. A young species that came from a world filled with storms, predators, natural disasters, poisonous plants, and dangerous terrain. A world where even the air and water could kill the unprepared. Humans were known for strange habits. Strange bravery. Strange choices. Some called them fearless. Others called them reckless. But one word followed humans everywhere. Deathworlders. Why would humans come here? Whispered the medical officer. We are not part of their territory. Maybe they did not understand the danger, another said. But the sensor operator shook her head. Commander. They're sending a message. The speakers crackled. A calm, confident voice filled the room. Helix Outpost, this is human ship Raptor's Eye. We received your call. Hang tight. Help is on the way. For several seconds, no one knew how to respond. Vorlak's tail twitched in confusion. This was not a military ship. It did not have the shape or size of any proper war vessel. And yet the voice sounded so certain, so casual, almost cheerful. Another explosion outside rocked the outpost. The Skarn flagship was charging its main cannon. If it fired, Helix would be destroyed instantly. The humans, however, did not change their tone. We're coming in fast. Don't panic if things get loud. Vorlak stared at the small ship speeding toward the massive Skarn armada. It was like watching an insect fly straight at a meteor. What kind of creatures walk willingly into a losing battle? He murmured. No one answered. But everyone wondered the same thing. What exactly had they called for, and what had answered? The blinding flash faded slowly, leaving the command center filled with stunned silence. Smoke curled around the ceiling vents. A few screens remained dark, burned out by the shockwave. Others blinked painfully back to life, showing static and broken images. The outpost seemed to groan like a living thing trying to stand after a heavy blow. Commander Vorlak clung to the console until the shaking stopped. His ears rang. His vision flickered. For a moment, he wondered if the outpost had been destroyed and he simply hadn't realized it yet. But then a single desperate voice broke the silence. Commander. Sensors. They're still online. We still exist. Vorlak blinked hard and forced his eyes to focus. The sensor display stabilized enough to show shapes in orbit. The Skarn flagship still floated above them, but something was wrong with it. One side of the huge vessel flickered with failing energy. A large section of its armor burned bright red as if something had torn into it at impossible speed. What happened? Vorlak whispered. The sensor officer worked quickly, tapping her damaged controls. I'm trying to analyze. Commander, the human ship hit the Skarn cannon. Not a crash. More like a strike. A strike. Vorlak swallowed. That meant the humans had aimed at the weakest part of the enemy's largest weapon and hit it with perfect accuracy, during chaos, under fire, and in a ship that should not be able to maneuver like that. Another officer shouted, Commander, incoming ship. It's the humans. They're alive. The holoscreen finally cleared enough to show the small vessel spiraling down through the smoke-filled sky. It trailed fire but did not break apart. Its engines sputtered but fought to stay steady. It was falling, but in a controlled, determined way, refusing to die. The communications speaker crackled. Helix Outpost. This is Crash Team Delta. We are, not dead. Prepare for landing. You might want to stand back. Actually, everyone should stand back a lot. The voice sounded tired but cheerful, as if this near-death stunt was something completely normal. Vorlak felt lightheaded. These humans were going to land inside the outpost, and from the tone of their voice, they seemed to consider that a friendly visit. He sent orders quickly. Clear the main hangar. Reinforce the emergency bulkheads. Medic team, prepare for casualties. The crew rushed out of the command center. The corridors shook as secondary impacts hit, but nothing compared to what they all felt next, a thunderous boom as the human ship smashed into the main hangar floor. The shockwave knocked several officers off their feet. Vorlak ran, skidding around a corner, and arrived at the hangar just as thick smoke rolled out like a storm cloud. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Metal fragments lay everywhere. A few pipes dripped glowing coolant across the cracked floor. The hangar doors groaned open wider, wheezing like a tired machine. From inside the smoke, footsteps echoed. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed nervously. Then 3 figures walked out, 2 tall, 1 slightly shorter, all wearing heavy protective suits with glowing visors. Their boots crunched across debris as if walking through crushed metal was completely normal. The tallest human raised a hand in greeting. Hi there. Anyone order backup? A dozen alien soldiers stood frozen, unsure whether to run away or clap in relief. Vorlak stepped forward, unable to control the shock in his voice. You survived that impact? The humans exchanged glances. The shorter one shrugged. We've had harder landings. The second human nodded. Yeah, once we crashed into a swamp full of acid lizards. That was way worse. Vorlak tried to imagine what kind of creature lived in a swamp full of acid lizards. He failed. The tall human stepped forward again. I'm team leader Rafe. This is Juno, our tech And that's Thatch, our heavy. Thatch, the biggest one, gave a friendly wave. His wave was strong enough to knock a loose metal panel off the wall behind him. Vorlak swallowed. You are Crash Team Delta? Yep, Juno said with a grin. We respond to emergencies. Usually the messy ones. The humans walked further into the hangar, carefully but confidently. The aliens moved aside fast. No one wanted to block a Deathworlder's path. One of the Helix engineers whispered to Vorlak, Commander. They're smaller than I expected. Small? Vorlak whispered back. Look at the damage they caused with one ship. Rafe removed his helmet, revealing a face covered in soot, sweat, and a few fresh cuts. Commander Vorlak, right? We picked up your distress call. Bad situation. But not hopeless. Vorlak stared at him. The Skarn have an entire fleet outside. You are only 3. Rafe smiled like someone discussing weather. 3's enough. Juno tapped her wrist device. We studied the battlefield during descent. The Skarn have a weakness in their mid-range formation. If we break it, you'll get a gap. Thatch cracked his knuckles loudly enough to echo. We'll make that gap real wide. Vorlak felt dizzy. These humans were speaking calmly about creating holes in a fleet formation that should be impossible to penetrate without a full army. He asked softly, why did you come? Humans have no duty to protect us. Rafe shrugged. Nobody deserves to be wiped out by bullies. Juno added, besides, you asked for help. Humans don't ignore that. The words settled over the hangar like a warm, steady light, the first real warmth the outpost had felt all day. Before Vorlak could respond, the walls trembled again. The Skarn flagship began shifting into a new attack pattern. Its damaged cannon was offline but backup weapons were charging. Rafe put his helmet back on and clapped Vorlak gently on the shoulder. All right, Commander. Enough introductions. Let's save your people. The humans walked toward the exit with confident, determined steps. Vorlak watched them go, still struggling to understand what kind of beings could walk so calmly toward a battle that no one else would dare to face. But one thing was now certain, whatever the humans planned next, the galaxy would remember it. Commander Vorlak hurried after the humans as they marched out of the hangar, still trying to understand why these strange, fearless creatures seemed so calm while the outpost shook around them. The humans walked with quick, confident steps, moving as if they already knew every hallway and corner, even though they had never been on Helix before. They studied every flickering light panel, every damaged pipe, every scorch mark on the walls with sharp, trained eyes. Rafe stopped suddenly in the hallway and turned to Juno. You saw those power junctions in the hangar? Yep, Juno answered, her fingers already tapping across her wrist device. They're patched with cheap connectors. This whole place isn't built for a siege. It wasn't, Vorlak admitted. We are a research outpost, not a fortress. Rafe nodded thoughtfully. Then we won't fight like a fortress. We'll fight like a moving target. Thatch grinned behind his visor. My favorite kind of fight. Vorlak tried to keep his voice steady. Humans, please explain your plan. You said something about creating a gap in the Skarn lines. How? Rafe walked over to a broken display screen and wiped the dust with his glove. He drew a fast circle in the air, and Juno projected a hologram from her device. A crude, flashing image of the battlefield appeared, Skarn ships surrounding the outpost like wolves tightening around an injured animal. Rafe pointed to the ships closest to Helix. These guys stay in tight formation because they think you're weak. That's your strength. They're relaxed, lazy, not expecting trouble. Juno zoomed the map. We've seen this formation before. It's like a cage. But every cage has a weak bar. Rafe tapped one glowing point in the hologram. Here. Between the assault destroyer and the turret frigate. They drift half a second out of sync. Half a second. Vorlak stared in disbelief. How can anyone even detect that small a gap? Rafe shrugged. Humans get bored easily. So we learn to notice things. Thatch let out a proud laugh. Also, we broke 2 ships using that timing once. Good times. Vorlak felt his stomach turn. You mean you used this tactic before? Yep, Juno said. Worked great. Except for the part where our ship almost tore in half. But we fixed that. Mostly, Thatch added. Rafe clapped his hands once. All right. We just need to hit that weak spot and cause confusion. The Skarn will pull ships to cover it, which opens a second gap. Then you move your outpost through. Vorlak blinked. Move the outpost? This structure is not made to fly under battle conditions. Rafe tilted his head. Well, yeah. But we're not gonna move the whole thing. Just rotate it by 20 degrees. Vorlak could not breathe for a moment. Rotate the outpost? In the middle of an attack? Under fire? Juno smiled sweetly, which somehow terrified him more than anything else. It'll distract them. Thatch added cheerfully, also, it'll make them think you have something big planned. Big mysteries make big enemies nervous. Vorlak tried to steady himself against the wall. This plan was not just reckless. It was madness. Not even the most desperate commander would rotate an entire outpost during a siege. The structural stress alone could crush half the rooms. Humans, he said quietly, this is not a normal strategy. This is not even a strategy. Rafe shrugged. Sure it is. It's a Deathworld strategy. Juno held up a finger. Step 1, create chaos. Step 2, Thatch said, pounding his fist into his palm, use chaos. Step 3, Rafe finished, win while everyone else is confused. The humans turned to leave, but Vorlak reached out and grabbed Rafe's arm. His claws trembled. If we follow this plan, many of my people may die. Rafe's expression softened. He placed a hand on Vorlak's shoulder. Commander. Many will die if we do nothing. But if we use this plan, you have a chance. Maybe a small one. But still a chance. There was no arrogance in his voice. No fear, either. Just focus. We're not here to save the outpost, Rafe continued. We're here to save the people inside it. Vorlak lowered his eyes. For a moment, he could see the truth in the human's words, truth born not from pride, but from experience with danger. He nodded slowly. Very well. What do you need from us? Rafe smiled. Good. First, I want your engineering team to the rotation engines. They need to prepare for a sudden load. Juno tapped her screen. Second, lock down all rooms on the west side. They'll shift the most. Thatch cracked his knuckles. And third, open every side door near the hangar. Vorlak frowned. Why the doors? Rafe pulled out a small black device. Because the Skarn will try to board you again once we hit them. And we're going to greet them properly. What kind of greeting? Vorlak asked cautiously. Thatch made a low whistle and pointed to the device. The loud kind. Juno added, and the bright kind. Rafe finished, and the kind there's no coming back from. Before Vorlak could ask more, the outpost shook again. A message came through the intercom. Commander. The Skarn are charging their secondary cannons. Rafe nodded. Time to move. The three humans sprinted down the hall, fast, purposeful, unstoppable. Vorlak watched them go with a mixture of dread and awe. They were not simply brave. They were not simply reckless. They were something else entirely. They were Deathworlders. And they had a plan. A terrifying plan, but perhaps the only one that could save them. The Skarn attack grew stronger as the humans raced through the outpost corridors. The lights flickered with every hit, and the metal floor trembled under their boots. Panic spread through the station as crew members rushed to sealed rooms, clutching tools, datapads, and each other. The humans moved against the flow, straight toward danger, while everyone else tried to run from it. Commander Vorlak followed close behind them, almost tripping as the hallway shifted again from another enemy blast. The humans hardly reacted. They walked with steady steps, as if the shaking floor were simply an uneven hiking path. What exactly are you planning to do once the Skarn try to board us again? Vorlak called out. Rafe didn't stop walking. Depends on what they bring. Juno added, if they're smart, they'll send heavy troops. Thatch grinned. And if they're dumb, they'll send the light ones. More fun that way. Vorlak shivered. To the humans, danger seemed like a hobby. They reached the side corridor near the hangar, the one with the thin outer wall, one of the most likely boarding points. The humans immediately got to work. Rafe pointed at a long stretch of floor. Thatch, line the charges. Thatch knelt down, placing black cylinders along the metal plates. Each one clicked softly as it magnetized into place. Juno adjusted settings on her wrist device, linking all the explosives. Vorlak's throat tightened. You are planning explosives inside my outpost. Yep, Juno said. Only in areas that are safe to blow. Well. Safe-ish. Thatch laughed. Don't worry. We've done this before. Vorlak muttered, "That does not make me feel better." Rafe stood again and turned toward him. "Commander, these charges aren't meant to destroy your base. They're meant to confuse the Skarn. If they break into this hallway, they'll think they trapped us. Then we hit them with a surprise." "What surprise?" Thatch tapped the explosives. "A loud one." Juno pointed to the ceiling. "And a bright one." Rafe finished, "Plus a lot of smoke. We fight better in chaos. Skarn hate it." Vorlak watched them, amazed and uneasy. He could not imagine any other species preparing to fight in a collapsing hallway, expecting the enemy to be the ones confused and scared. Another deep vibration rolled through the outpost. A voice came through the speakers. "Commander Vorlak, enemy boarding craft approaching the west corridor." Rafe nodded. "Right on time." Juno checked her device. "They'll cut through the wall in about 30 seconds. Thatch cracked his neck. "Plenty." The humans positioned themselves where the smoke would be thickest once the charges blew. Rafe stood at the front, Juno behind him with her tools ready, and Thatch at the rear, lifting a heavy metal shield he had built from spare parts in the hangar. Vorlak stared at them. "You aren't taking cover?" Rafe shrugged. "We are the cover." Vorlak wanted to argue, but the metal wall suddenly glowed red as a Skarn plasma cutter sliced through it from the outside. Sparks rained onto the floor. A thick line of molten metal traveled across the wall's surface, then another, then a third. The Skarn were forming a triangle cut. They were coming in fast. "Ready," Rafe murmured. Juno held a small trigger device tightly. "Mark." The wall exploded inward with a deafening boom as the Skarn finished the cut. Smoke filled the corridor instantly. 3 armored Skarn troops marched through the hole, weapons raised, glowing eyes searching for targets. They saw nothing, only darkness and swirling smoke. Then Juno tapped the trigger. Every explosive along the floor erupted with a flash of white light and a wave of thunderous sound. The shockwave slammed the Skarn back into the wall they had entered from. Their armor rattled. Their sensors malfunctioned. Their formation collapsed. The humans moved. To Vorlak, they didn't move like soldiers. They moved like predators. Rafe charged first, sliding low under a Skarn blast and smashing his shoulder into the nearest trooper. The impact knocked the Skarn off its feet. Juno jumped forward next, swinging a metal tool directly into the joint of another Skarn's armor, releasing a burst of sparks. The injured Skarn staggered, trying to strike back. Thatch barreled through the smoke behind them, lifting his improvised shield. He slammed it into the third Skarn so hard that the creature flew backward through the hole in the wall and tumbled out of sight. Vorlak watched with wide eyes. The humans did not fight with grace or clean form. They fought with instinct, speed, and a strange creative violence that he had never seen from any trained soldier. They turned loose debris into weapons. They used the smoke as cover. They moved as one unit without speaking. These were not troops. They were something more dangerous. Rafe punched the fallen Skarn until its armor cracked. Juno sent an electric jolt through the second Skarn's exposed wiring, dropping it instantly. Thatch leaned through the hull breach and finished the last Skarn with the blunt end of his shield. A minute later, the hallway was silent except for fading echoes. Rafe rose slowly, brushing dust from his suit. Juno checked her tools with satisfaction. Thatch wiped a smear of green Skarn blood from his shield. Vorlak approached them in awe. "You defeated them in seconds." Rafe tilted his head. "That was the warm-up." Thatch pointed down the hall as another alarm sounded. "More boarding craft incoming." Juno smiled. "Perfect. We have more surprises." Vorlak swallowed. "Humans. How can you face this without fear?" Rafe looked at him for a long moment before answering. His voice was calm but firm. "Because fear doesn't stop danger. But action might." Before Vorlak could respond, the outpost lights dimmed again. The first phase of the human plan was working. Chaos had begun. And the Deathworlders were only getting started. The hallway still smelled of smoke and burned metal when the second wave of Skarn troops arrived. This time they came from 2 directions at once, more organized, more alert, and clearly angry. Their boots pounded against the floor in heavy rhythm, and their weapons glowed with a stronger charge. They were no longer treating the outpost as a weak target. They were hunting now. Commander Vorlak pressed himself against the wall, heart pounding. He could hear the humans breathing calmly beside him, preparing for another impossible fight. Juno checked the power on her wrist device. Thatch tightened a strap on his shield, and Rafe rolled his shoulders with the relaxed movement of someone stretching before a morning jog. Bigger group this time, Thatch said. Better toys, too, Juno added. Those rifles are the new Skarn models. Rafe nodded. Good. Means we only have to hit them once to ruin their day. Vorlak stared at them, stunned. Humans. There are too many. You cannot fight them like you fought the first wave. Rafe gave him a quick grin. We're not going to. What will you do? Vorlak asked. Break the rules, Rafe said simply. The first Skarn line turned the corner, weapons raised. Vorlak braced for another explosion, but instead Rafe threw something small and dark down the corridor. It bounced once and rolled to the Skarn's feet. A tiny blinking light appeared on its side. The Skarn barely had time to react before the device burst, not with fire, but with a violent shockwave of sound. The pressure hit with such force that Vorlak felt it in his bones. The Skarn staggered, dropping their weapons. Their armor vibrated violently as their helmets crackled with static. Rafe yelled, "Go!" The humans charged forward before the echo even faded. Thatch slammed into the stunned frontline troops like a falling wall. Rafe used the moment of confusion to leap onto a nearby crate, spring off it, and crash into the next Skarn mid-chest. Juno slid on her knee between two troops and stabbed a buzzing tool into the joint beneath one Skarn's arm, sending sparks shooting out. Vorlak watched in awe as three humans tore into a force 5 times their size. But the Skarn were learning. The second half of the group recovered faster, forming a tight defensive line. They brought up heavy rifles, aiming at the humans who were now out of position, still locked in close combat. Vorlak's throat tightened. Behind you. Rafe heard the warning but didn't turn. Instead, he grabbed the Skarn he was fighting and spun it around like a shield. Plasma bolts slammed into the alien's armor, leaving scorching holes. The dying Skarn collapsed, and Rafe dropped behind the body for cover. Juno ducked behind a broken railing. Thatch crouched low and lifted his shield, deflecting blasts that rang like metal thunder. Vorlak, Juno shouted. Hit the emergency lights. The lights? Vorlak questioned. Trust me. Vorlak slammed his hand onto the nearest panel. The overhead lights went dark, replaced by rapid flashing red strobes. The hallway became a nightmare of shadows and flickering shapes. The Skarn formation broke instantly. They were strong. They were brutal. But they hated darkness. Their helmets were tuned for bright battlefields, and the shifting strobe lights made their sensors panic. Their aim wavered wildly. Humans, however, adapted instantly. Rafe moved with such speed that Vorlak almost thought he was seeing an illusion. In the flashing red light, the human team looked like something out of a ghost story, appearing in one spot, then another, too fast and too unpredictable to track. Juno slid across the floor and shoved a light bomb under the feet of the nearest Skarn. It burst upward in a blinding flash. The alien screamed as its helmet overloaded. Rafe tackled it a second later. Thatch roared as he charged with his shield, knocking 3 Skarn into the wall so hard that their armor dented inward. He swung the shield again and again, hitting with more force than seemed possible for a creature his size. But even as the humans fought like storms, Vorlak noticed something else, fatigue creeping into their movements. Rafe's breathing grew heavier. Juno's hand shook when she switched tools. Thatch took longer to recover between hits. Humans were powerful, but they were only flesh and bone. Vorlak felt fear rise. The Skarn were relentless. They were adapting. They were pushing the humans back step by step, and there were still more waves coming. Then one of the Skarn pulled out a large, jagged device, something Vorlak recognized instantly. Grenade, he cried. Rafe saw it just as the Skarn activated the throw. He shoved Juno behind a pillar, grabbed Thatch by the collar, and shoved all 3 of them toward cover. The grenade bounced once on the floor and exploded. Heat and dust filled the air. Metal shards flew in every direction. Vorlak shielded his face and dropped to the floor as the blast ripped through the corridor. When the smoke cleared, Vorlak coughed and pulled himself up. His ears rang. The whole hallway seemed blurry. Then he heard movement, slow, painful movement. Rafe pushed himself up with a groan. His suit was torn down one side, smoke drifting from the damage. Juno lay beside him, coughing hard but alive. Thatch crawled forward, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Vorlak hurried to them. You are injured. Rafe spat dust onto the ground. That's normal. Juno winced. Hurts like ow, yeah. Thatch shook his head. I can still fight. But they were breathing hard now. Sweat dripped down their faces. Their hands shook with exhaustion. And more scarred footsteps echoed down the hall. Vorlak felt fear twist inside him. The humans were not unstoppable. They were not invincible. But they did not retreat. Rafe stood, limping slightly. He lifted his weapon with hands that trembled but refused to drop. Helix still needs us, he said. So we keep moving. And the humans stepped into the smoke again, injured, exhausted, but still fighting. Because for them, quitting meant death. And humans didn't quit. The hallway trembled again as more scarred footsteps approached, echoing like distant thunder through the smoke. Commander Vorlak felt his claws dig into the metal floor. The humans were hurt, really hurt, and yet they were stepping forward again, preparing to face another wave of enemies. Their movements were slower now, their breathing harsh, but their eyes held the same burning focus as before. Rafe wiped blood from his cheek with the back of his glove. Team status? Juno coughed but held her tools firmly. Still here. Thatch snorted and lifted his shield. Skarn hit like babies. Vorlak knew that wasn't true. The Skarn had hit them with enough force to break armored troops from any other species. But the humans stood anyway, swaying a little, but standing. Another explosion rattled the corridor. Panels fell from the ceiling, spraying sparks. The lights flickered and then went black again, plunging everything into faint emergency glow. Commander, a voice shouted through Vorlak's wrist. Calm, the outpost engines are overheating. If we rotate the station now, we risk. We know the risk, Vorlak answered. Prepare to activate on my signal. Rafe heard him and nodded. Good. Keep them busy. When we open that gap in the Skarn lines, your people will have one chance. Don't waste it. Vorlak couldn't tell if this was confidence or insanity. Maybe for humans, it was both. The Skarn troops turned the corner, this time a full squad of armored soldiers, half carrying shields, the others carrying heavy cannons meant for destroying bunkers, not people. They marched in a tight formation, glowing armor plates clicking together. Even through the smoke, Vorlak could see this group was different. They weren't angry or surprised. They were ready. Rafe's expression tensed. Delta, stagger positions. Juno moved to the right side of the hall, hiding behind broken pipes. Thatch took the left, shield raised high. Rafe remained in front, breathing slowly, calming his nerves. He wasn't fearless. Vorlak could see that clearly now. Humans just acted despite fear. The Skarn lifted their weapons as one, and fired. The hallway exploded with light. Plasma bolts cracked against Thatch's shield. The heat singed the floor. A blast grazed Rafe's shoulder, burning through his armor and making him growl in pain. Juno ducked, but a shot hit the pipe above her. Steam burst out, blinding her. Juno, Rafe shouted. I'm fine. She coughed, raising her device again, though her hand shook violently. But the Skarn formation held steady. They were pushing forward, step by step, shields raised, weapons firing in perfect rhythm. Vorlak felt despair rising in his throat. How will you stop them now? He whispered. Rafe didn't answer. He just reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small metal canister. He twisted the top and tossed it lightly at the Skarn's feet. It hit the floor and rolled. The Skarn hesitated. They had seen explosives earlier. But this device didn't explode with fire or sound. Instead, it burst open like a blooming flower, shooting out a thick fog of shimmering silver particles. The cloud spread instantly, covering the Skarn line. Thatch, Rafe shouted. Thatch slammed his shield into the floor and crouched. Rafe and Juno dropped beside him. The Skarn didn't understand. They fired blindly. Then the particles reacted. A blinding flash filled the hall, pure white, brighter than sunlight. Vorlak threw an arm over his face and fell backward. He felt heat wash over him, then sudden cold. His ears rang as though struck by a thunderclap. When the light faded, Vorlak blinked tears from his eyes. The Skarn formation was in chaos. Their armor plates sparked and smoked. Their helmets flickered with static. Half of them were sinking to their knees, stunned and confused. The other half tried to retreat but stumbled into each other. Rafe got up slowly, swaying. Juno. Surge pulse. Juno, still coughing, tapped her wrist device. A pulse of electric energy snapped down the hallway, slamming into the Skarn. The damaged armor amplified the shock. The entire squad collapsed like fallen statues. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Thatch broke the silence. I like that one. Let's do it again sometime. Juno smiled weakly. After I get new lungs. Rafe leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Delta. Good work. Vorlak stared at the defeated Skarn, then at the three exhausted humans. They were pale, shaking, covered in burns, and clearly past their limits. But their eyes still held determination. Humans, he said softly, why do you keep fighting? You could retreat. Hide. Save yourselves. Rafe looked at him with tired but steady eyes. Because we said we'd help. And humans don't run when others depend on us. Vorlak didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, feeling something heavy and warm settle inside his chest. Respect. Deep and unshakable. But the moment of calm ended when Juno's device beeped urgently. Rafe. The Skarn flagship is moving. They're rotating their guns. Thatch cursed under his breath. They're gonna fire on the outpost again. Rafe stood straight, despite the pain. Then we hit them first. He turned to Vorlak. Commander, now. Rotate helix. Vorlak hesitated only a second, then spoke into his calm. Engineering, initiate rotation. Deep below them, engines groaned like ancient beasts waking from sleep. The entire outpost began to tilt, metal struts bending, walls creaking. Rafe opened a channel on his wrist. Delta, final phase. We punch through the gap, hit the flagship's weak point, and force a retreat. Juno took a shaky breath. We can do it. Thatch lifted his shield with both hands. Let's finish this. Vorlak watched them run toward the hangar, battered but unbroken. And he realized something with absolute certainty. These three humans were about to change the entire battle. Not because they were the strongest. Not because they were the smartest. But because they refused to give up, even when everything said they should. They were Deathworlders. And they were about to prove it. The outpost groaned like a wounded creature as the engines forced it to rotate. Metal beams strained. Floor panels shifted. The lights flickered wildly. Crew members clung to rails and doorframes while the entire station tilted by degrees it was never designed to handle. And through it all, Commander Vorlak ran after the humans toward the hangar, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Crash Team Delta moved slower now. Their steps were uneven, their bodies stiff with pain, but they kept moving. Vorlak could hear their labored breathing echo through the hall. Juno stumbled once. Thatch caught her before she hit the floor. Easy, he muttered. I'm fine, she said, but her voice cracked. Rafe kept glancing back at his team, checking their pace, their injuries, their weapons. He wasn't just a leader, he was the glue holding them upright. The outpost shuddered again, harder this time. Vorlak steadied himself. Rotation at 15 degrees, he said into his calm. Maintain engine pressure. Commander, the Skarn flagship is charging its primary cannon. A panicked voice answered. Vorlak's stomach twisted. Hold rotation. Buy the humans time. The corridor opened into the damaged hangar. Smoke drifted along the ceiling. The human ship, the Raptor's Eye, lay tilted on one side, its hull scorched and cracked, sparks popping from exposed wiring. It looked like a dead thing. But Thatch slapped the hull. Still alive? He asked the ship, half joking, half serious. The engine sputtered, coughed a line of flame, then went silent again. Juno crawled under the side panel, pulling out tools with shaking hands. I can get her flying. Not pretty, but flying. Rafe nodded. Do it. He turned to Vorlak. Commander, get your people ready. When we break the Skarn line, your outpost will be free for a short window. Use it to push away from the battlefield. Vorlak stared at him. You intend to strike the flagship alone? Thatch answered with a grin. Not alone. There's three of us. That is not what I meant, Vorlak said, voice shaking. You are injured. Your ship is barely able to move. You cannot win a direct fight. Rafe placed a hand on Vorlak's shoulder. We don't need to win. We just need to hit them hard enough that they decide we're not worth the trouble. Juno shouted from beneath the ship. Power restored. Probably. Maybe don't touch anything that sparks. Rafe helped Thatch lift her out. Her arms were shaking badly now, but her eyes still held a fierce light. They climbed into the ship one by one. Rafe paused at the ramp and turned back to Vorlak. The commander saw something in the human's eyes, determination, but also a quiet sadness, as if he knew this might be the final moment they'd speak. Whatever happens, Rafe said, don't let the Skarn take this world. Fight smart. Fight together. Before Vorlak could answer, the hatch sealed shut. The Raptor's eye screamed to life, coughing smoke and fire as its engines struggled to lift it. The entire hangar vibrated. Several panels popped loose and fell to the floor. But slowly, painfully, the ship rose from the ground like a stubborn creature refusing to die. Vorlak stepped back as the ship turned toward the exit. The hangar shields flickered open for a brief moment, just long enough for the vessel to blast through. Outside, the battlefield exploded into view. The Skarn fleet hovered like metal monsters surrounding a dying animal. Their cannons glowed red. Their fighters swarmed. And at the center, the flagship aimed its giant weapon directly at Outpost Helix. The Raptor's eye flew straight at it. No dodging. No subtlety. Just speed and fury. Inside the ship, Rafe gripped the controls with both hands. Delta, hold on. Juno strapped herself in and muttered, if we die, I'm haunting you. Thatch laughed weakly. You'll have to wait in line. Skarn fighters saw the human ship approaching and opened fire. Beams of plasma streaked past, scorching space. One hit the Raptor's eye directly. The ship shook violently. Rafe didn't slow. He aimed not at the flagship's cannons, but at a narrow, exposed joint near the upper hull, something no alien scan had ever noticed. Something tiny. A weak point only a human, with their strange eyes and stranger instincts, would dare to exploit. Almost there, Rafe whispered. The flagship cannon reached full charge. A blinding glow gathered at its center. Vorlak watched from the command center, breath frozen in his lungs. Move. Move. Rafe slammed the throttle forward. At the exact moment the cannon fired, the Raptor's eye spun sideways, the blast scraping past its hull by meters. Then it dove straight into the weak joint. And unleashed everything it had. The explosion was small. Almost delicate compared to the massive ships around it. But it hit the perfect spot. The flagship lurched. Lights across its surface dimmed. Its cannon shut down instantly. And a ripple passed through the entire Skarn formation, a ripple of fear. In the command center, Vorlak saw it happen. The Skarn began to retreat. They didn't send a message. Didn't threaten. Didn't roar. They simply turned and fled. One tiny human ship had made an entire war fleet afraid. When the battlefield quieted, Vorlak's calm crackled weakly. A familiar voice spoke through static. Helix. This is Delta. Mission complete. We're coming home. Cheers erupted through the outpost. Some cried. Some collapsed in relief. Vorlak sank into his chair, shaking. Humans. These terrifying, stubborn, miraculous creatures. They had answered a call for help and saved an entire station. Hours later, when the Raptor's eye limped back into the hangar, barely holding together, Vorlak stood waiting with every surviving crew member behind him. The humans stepped out, tired, burned, limping, but alive. Vorlak bowed deeply. We cannot repay what you have done. Rafe smiled weakly. Sure you can. Just survive. And maybe offer snacks next time. Juno raised a hand. Definitely snacks. Thatch nodded. And drinks. The outpost crew laughed, real, relieved laughter for the first time in days. As the humans walked forward, Vorlak whispered the truth aloud. We requested backup. But what we got were Deathworlders. And the galaxy would never forget it.